The mountain did not merely rise. It loomed, abrupt and defiant, like a jagged tooth thrust from the earth's dark jaw. Its black cliffs tore at the sky, their edges sharp and uneven, as though they sought to rend the heavens themselves and drag the clouds screaming down into the abyss below. Even from miles away, Taen Ango dominated the horizon, an unyielding silhouette that seemed less a natural formation and more a ragged scar upon the world. The locals spoke its name in hushed tones, rarely above a whisper, as though the mountain might hear and take offense. Taen Ango, the dragon's rest. Yet no dragon had been seen there for centuries, at least none that men could agree upon. What remained were stories, fractured and fading, carried on the wind like the last glowing embers of a long-dead fire. Some swore that on cold nights, when the air grew thin and brittle, you could still hear a distant rumble echoing from its heights. Not thunder, but something deeper, older, breathing. At the mountain's peak stood the fortress. It was not built in the way other strongholds were raised, with careful planning and measured hands. No, this place had been carved, wrenched from the mountain's own bones with a violence that time had never fully softened. The stone walls were jagged and irregular, as though shaped by something that mimicked human craft but did not fully understand it. Angles met where they should not. Lines wavered where they should have been straight. It was a place that felt almost right to the eye, and therefore profoundly wrong. The towers leaned ever so slightly, like ancient men too proud to bow, yet too weary to stand upright. Their shadows stretched long and thin across the rock, resembling skeletal fingers clutching at the empty air. The great gates, forged of iron, bore scars no blacksmith could explain, deep pits and warped edges, as if they had once been subjected to a heat so intense that even metal had screamed beneath it. No forge in any kingdom burned that hot, no fire known to man. And within those grim walls, Lord Kael'var lay dying. For nearly 50 years, Kael'var had ruled Taen Ango, his name spoken with equal parts reverence and fear across the surrounding lands. In his youth, he had been a figure out of legend, broad-shouldered, relentless, his laughter as fierce as his temper. They said he had wrestled wolves in the deep winter snows and emerged bloodied but victorious, his breath steaming in the frozen air as the beasts lay still at his feet. They said he had stood alone against invading armies, his blade flashing like lightning, his roar carrying over the clash of steel like the voice of a storm. Perhaps those stories had grown in the telling. Legends often did, but even legends bowed, eventually, to time. Time was the quietest conqueror of all. It did not charge with banners or cry out in triumph. It crept. It waited, and in the end, it claimed everything. Now Kael'var lay in a high chamber, open to the cold mountain air, where no fire could quite chase away the chill. Thick furs had been piled upon him, wolf, bear, and heavier pelt still, but they did little to warm his failing body. The cold had settled into his bones long ago, and it was not the kind that could be driven out. His breath came unevenly, a harsh, brittle sound, like loose stones rattling down a barren slope.
They are coming.
Sereth, Kael'var's faithful second-in-command, stood beside the bed, unmoving as a sentinel carved from the same dark stone as the fortress itself. He had served Kael'var for decades, through wars, winters, and long, uneasy silences, and the weight of that loyalty showed in the rigid line of his shoulders. Kael'var did not open his eyes. Not yet.
From the east?
Yes, Your Highness.
Are they marauders?
Sereth hesitated, and in that brief pause lay more truth than any words could carry.
He spoke at last.
Not quite, my lord. Worse, they are organized, disciplined.
A faint twitch stirred on Kael'var's lips, something that might once have been a smile.
Then they are no longer mere raiders. This is an army.
They march under a red banner, no crest, no name.
At that, Kael'var's eyes opened. Age had clouded them, dimmed their brightness, but something within remained unbroken, sharp as frost, hard as iron. For a moment, the years seemed to fall away, and the man who had once defied entire armies looked out from behind that failing flesh.
Men without a name are men who intend to take one.
And give none back.
Silence followed, heavy and absolute, settling over the chamber like fresh fallen snow. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath beyond the open walls.
How long do we have?
Days, sire, perhaps less.
Kael'var exhaled, the sound thin and final, as though each breath cost him more than the last. His gaze drifted past Sereth, beyond the chamber, to the vast and unforgiving expanse of mountain and sky.
Then Taen Ango will fall with me.
But there was something in his voice, quiet, almost lost beneath the rattle of his breath, that suggested he was not entirely certain whether that was a lament or a warning. Far to the south, beyond the deep whispering forests, where sunlight filtered through emerald canopies, beyond the winding rivers that cut silver paths through fertile valleys, beyond the wide gentle lands painted in hues of green and gold, a young warlord dreamed of fire. His name was Aeryn. He had risen quickly, too quickly some said, carving a name for himself where others had spent lifetimes trying and failing. There was something about him that unsettled even those who followed him, a sense that his victories came not only from skill or cunning, but from some deeper instinct, something half-remembered and not entirely his own. He did not speak of it, but it lingered in the way he watched the horizon, as though listening for a call no one else could hear. And on that night the call came. In his dream, he stood alone before a mountain that seemed to breathe. Its vast, black form loomed against a sky choked with ash, its peak shrouded in a slow, constant exhale of smoke. The air around it shimmered with heat, yet the ground beneath his feet felt cold, unnaturally so, as though frost lay hidden beneath the surface. The mountain was alive in a way that defied reason, its presence pressing against him like a weight, like a gaze. He knew this place, not as one knows a road walked many times, nor as one recalls a distant story, but as one remembers an injury.
Deep, old,
unhealed. Then the voice came. It did not speak in words. There was no language, no sound shaped by breath or tongue. Instead, it poured into him, vast and ancient, heavy with age and hunger. It was a feeling before it was anything else, a pull that reached into his chest and tightened, a command that did not demand obedience because it assumed it already. Beneath it was a sense that the voice knew to whom it was speaking, that it recognized him, not only as a warrior, but as an individual.
Your time has come. Heed my call.
The words seemed to echo through his bones, though they had never truly been spoken. Aeryn woke with a sharp intake of breath, his body rigid, his heart hammering against his ribs as though trying to escape. For a moment, the dream clung to him, the smoke, the heat, the terrible presence of the mountain, before reality forced its way back in. But something was wrong. The night air was warm, thick with the lingering heat of the southern plains, yet his skin burned with cold. Frost clung to his arms, thin and fragile, melting even as he stared at it. His breath came in shallow bursts, each exhale ghosting faintly in the dark. He sat there for a long time, unmoving, his gaze fixed on nothing, or perhaps on something far away. By the time dawn broke, pale gold spreading across the horizon, he had already made his decision.
We are heading north.
The words fell into the morning air without ceremony, spoken as though they had always been inevitable. He only had 20 followers, 20 warriors bound not by oath to any kingdom, nor by loyalty to any crown, but to Aeryn himself. Each had followed him for their own reasons, some for glory, others for coin, a few for debts that could never truly be repaid. They were hardened by years of blood and battle, marked by scars that told stories better left unspoken. Together, they had carved their path through raids and skirmishes, through victories that had come almost too easily, and defeats that had bitten deep, leaving their marks not just on flesh, but on bone and memory alike. They were not men and women who questioned lightly, but his insistence gave them reason to pause. Lisa stepped forward, her broad frame casting a long shadow in the early light. She was taller than most men, her shoulders thick with muscle, her presence as solid as iron. A long scar ran from her brow to her jaw, pale against her dark skin, a reminder of a battle she had survived when others had not. When she spoke, her voice was edged with skepticism.
North? There's nothing north but cold and ghosts.
Aeryn did not turn to face her. His eyes were fixed on the distant horizon, where the land began to shift, where the warmth of the south gave way, slowly, inevitably, to harsher, lonelier places.
There is something there. I have seen it.
Lisa studied him for a moment, her brow furrowing.
Was it a vision?
Aeryn's jaw tightened slightly.
A memory, or something pretending to be one.
That answer should have raised more questions. It should have drawn doubt, or challenge, or even refusal. But it did not, because whatever drove Aeryn, whatever unseen force pulled at him from the distant north, they had felt its shadow before. In the way he fought, in the choices he made, in the strange, unerring certainty that seemed to guide him where others would falter. And so, they did not question him further. They gathered their gear in silence. Steel was checked, straps tightened, cloaks drawn close, despite the lingering warmth of the morning. Horses were saddled, their restless movements betraying a tension their riders did not speak aloud. Then, as the sun climbed higher, burning away the last traces of dawn, the small band turned their backs on the fertile lands of the south, and they rode. The fortress of Taen Ango prepared for siege the way a dying man prepares for his final breath, with grim acceptance settling into every corner and a stubborn, unyielding defiance that refused to be extinguished. There was no panic within its walls. No cries, no chaos. Only purpose. Archers lined the ramparts in long, silent rows, their bows already strung, their fingers testing the tension of gut and wood with practiced ease. Quivers were filled and refilled, arrows fletched in black and gray like the feathers of carrion birds. They spoke little, but their eyes never stopped moving, watching the horizon, measuring distance, waiting. Below them, great iron cauldrons were hauled into place and set over roaring fires. Oil thickened and darkened as it heated, its surface trembling with slow, viscous bubbles. The smell of it, sharp and heavy, filled the air, clinging to the back of the throat. Nearby, soldiers worked whetstones along the edges of blades, the steady rasp of steel on stone weaving through the fortress like a quiet, relentless rhythm. Swords, axes, and spears were honed until their edges gleamed cold and thin, sharp enough, so the old saying went, to shave the breath from a man's lips before he even realized it had been taken. Every movement carried the same understanding. This would not be a battle they expected to win, but it would be one they refused to lose easily. Beyond the fortress walls, the Eastern Army gathered. They did not arrive in disorder, nor with the scattered unpredictability of raiders. They came as a single deliberate force, a dark tide rolling steadily across the land, swallowing distance with quiet inevitability. Rank upon rank of soldiers moved in disciplined formation, their lines clean, their pace measured. Armor caught the pale light of the sky in dull, bloodless flashes. Shields rose and fell in unison. There was no shouting, no drunken bravado, only silence and purpose. Their banners, if they could be called that, were as unsettling as the army itself. Long strips of crimson cloth snapped sharply in the wind, their color deep and raw, like fresh spilled blood. Yet they bore no crest, no sigil, no mark of allegiance. Nothing to declare who they were or where they came from. Nothing except intent. At the very front of that advancing mass rode a lone figure, clad in black armor that drank in the light rather than reflecting it. The plates were smooth, almost unnatural in their design, flowing together like something grown rather than forged. His face was hidden behind a helm shaped into a snarling beast, its jaws parted in a silent, eternal roar, its empty eye sockets staring forward without mercy or hesitation. He did not look back.
He did not need to.
The army followed him without question. High above, upon the battlements, Sereth watched. The wind tugged at his cloak, snapping its edges like a warning, but he stood firm, his hands resting lightly on the cold stone of the parapet. His eyes moved constantly, tracking formations, counting ranks, searching for weakness where there seemed to be none. When he spoke, the question was more to himself than anyone else.
Who leads men without a name?
A man who intends to erase others.
The voice came from behind him, calm, measured, and entirely unannounced. Sereth turned sharply, one hand already moving toward the hilt of his sword. Aeryn stood there. Dust from the long road still clung to his cloak, dulling its color, and the hem was frayed where it had dragged across miles of unforgiving terrain. His boots were worn, his armor marked by travel rather than ceremony. Yet there was nothing diminished about him. If anything, the journey had sharpened him, stripped him down to something harder, more defined. His eyes caught the light of the overcast sky, reflecting it in a way that made them seem almost too pale, too distant. Behind him, his 20 warriors had already begun to spread out along the wall, moving with quiet efficiency. They spoke in low tones, pointing here and there, measuring distances, noting blind spots, tracing the flow of the fortress as if they had always known it. They ran hands along the stone, tested the weight of gates, studied the angles of approach, assessing, calculating, finding weakness. Sereth's voice tightened with suspicion.
How did you know to come here?
There is no time. You're outnumbered.
His gaze flicked briefly toward the army below, then back to Sereth.
Your walls will hold for a day, perhaps two. After that, they won't need to break you from the outside. They'll break you from within.
Sereth's hand closed fully around the hilt of his sword now, though he did not draw it. His voice was low, edged with steel.
And how do you know this?
Aeryn's expression remained unchanged.
Because I have seen it before.
The words hung between them, heavy and unadorned. For a moment, neither man spoke. The wind howled softly through the gaps in the stone, carrying with it the distant rhythmic march of the army below. Sereth studied him, this stranger who spoke with the certainty of a veteran commander, who stood unflinching in the shadow of an approaching force that would make lesser men falter.
Who are you?
Aeryn's gaze shifted then, drawn past Sereth, beyond the battlements, into the heart of the fortress itself.
Toward the inner keep.
Toward the chamber where Lord Kael'var lay dying. Something flickered across his expression, recognition, unease, and something deeper. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter.
I am certain I belong here.
And though the words were soft, they carried a weight that neither man could fully explain. Kael'var felt Aeryn's presence before he saw him. It came not as a sound, nor as a movement in the chamber, but as a shift, subtle, undeniable, like the change in the air before a storm breaks. Something in the space around him tightened, sharpened. The faint, ever-present ache in his bones seemed to stir, as though in recognition rather than pain. His breath rattled in his chest, thin and uneven, but beneath it, something deeper awakened.
Send him in.
No one had yet announced a visitor. No footsteps had crossed the threshold. And yet Kaelvar knew. He knew. The guards hesitated only a heartbeat before obeying, their unease unspoken but palpable. Moments later, the heavy doors groaned softly as they opened. Aeryn entered alone. The chamber seemed to draw in around him as he stepped forward, the cold mountain air slipping in through the open arches and stirring the furs draped across Kaelvar's frail body. For a moment, the two men simply looked at one another. Silence stretched between them, thick, electric. It felt like the instant before lightning split the sky. Kaelvar lay half-reclined among his furs, his once formidable frame diminished by time and illness, yet there was nothing weak in his gaze. His eyes, though clouded with age, remained piercing, sharp enough to cut through flesh and find whatever lay beneath. Aeryn stood at the foot of the bed, travel-worn and unadorned, his presence at odds with the weight of the chamber. He should have seemed out of place. He did not. If anything, it felt as though the room had been waiting for him.
You hear it too.
His voice was little more than a rasp, but it carried with it a quiet certainty, not a question, but a recognition. Aeryn inclined his head slightly.
Yes, sir. Ever since I was a boy.
There was no hesitation in his answer, no confusion, only acceptance of something that had always been there, even when it made no sense. Kaelvar's gaze drifted past him then, out through the open archways to the vast, pale sky beyond. The wind moved softly through the chamber, carrying with it the distant scent of stone and snow.
Taen Ango chooses its defenders. It always has.
There was something almost reverent in the way he spoke, not of the fortress itself, but of whatever lay beneath it. Within it, something older than stone. Aeryn's brow tightened slightly, though he did not look away.
But I am no lord.
The words were simple, but there was an edge to them, a quiet resistance to something he could feel closing around him. Kaelvar's lips curved faintly, the ghost of a smile that carried neither mockery nor doubt.
No, you are something else.
The weight of that lingered. Aeryn stepped closer, the faint scrape of his boots against the stone floor echoing softly in the chamber. Up close, the reality of Kaelvar's condition was impossible to ignore. The shallow rise and fall of his chest, the pallor of his skin, the way even the smallest movement seemed to cost him effort.
You're dying.
There was no cruelty in the statement, no attempt to soften it either, just truth.
Yes, that is so.
And they are coming.
Kaelvar's eyes flickered briefly, as though he could see them even now. The red banners, the silent ranks, the slow, inevitable advance.
Yes, they are close now.
The words felt heavier this time. Aeryn's jaw tightened, a muscle in his cheek shifting as something within him settled into place. Resolve, perhaps, or inevitability.
Then give me your command.
It was not spoken as a plea, nor as a demand. It was an offering. Kaelvar studied him in silence. For a long moment, the old lord said nothing, his gaze searching Aeryn's face, not for strength or skill, or even loyalty, but for something far less tangible. Something that could not be taught nor forged. Something that either was there or was not. At last, with visible effort, Kaelvar lifted his hand. The motion was slow, trembling, the strength in his arm all but spent. Yet there was intention in it still, a deliberate act, heavy with meaning. His hand came to rest against Aeryn's chest. For an instant, everything seemed to go still. Aeryn felt it, not the frailty of the old man's touch, but the weight behind it, a pressure that sank deeper than flesh, as though something unseen had reached through Kael'var and into him.
This is not my command.
His voice was softer now, yet clearer than it had been before, as though this moment, had stripped away the weakness that plagued him.
It is my burden.
The words settled between them like a verdict. And in that touch, in that quiet, irrevocable passing, something shifted. Not in the room, not in the fortress, but in Aeryn himself. The attack came at dawn, not with a roar, nor with the chaotic fury of undisciplined raiders, but with a sudden, overwhelming precision that turned the breaking of day into something violent and final. For a brief, fragile moment, the world had been quiet. Pale light crept over the jagged peaks of Taen Ango, painting the stone in cold gold. The wind moved softly along the battlements. Breath steamed in the chill air. Then the sky darkened. Arrows rose in a single, unified arc, thousands upon thousands of them, lifting from the ranks below like a flock of black-winged birds. For an instant, they seemed to hang there, suspended between earth and sky. Then they fell. The sound was a hiss, a scream, a storm of sharpened death tearing downward. Shields snapped up along the walls, wood and iron rattling under the sudden assault. Men cried out as shafts found gaps in armor, as bodies jerked and fell. Stone rang with the impact, arrows splintering, skittering, embedding deep. Before the echoes of that first volley had faded, the ground itself began to tremble. Battering rams surged forward beneath heavy coverings of hide and timber, their iron-shod heads swinging with brutal rhythm. Each impact against the fortress gates rang like a bell of war. Deep, resounding, inevitable.
Boom.
The gates shuddered.
Boom.
Dust fell from the hinges in thin, drifting clouds.
Boom.
The sound seemed to travel through the very bones of the mountain. Elsewhere, grappling hooks soared upward, their curved claws catching against the jagged edges of the walls. Ropes went taut as soldiers below hauled themselves upward, boots scraping against stone, hands gripping with desperate determination. They came from every direction, and the defenders met them. There was no retreat, no thought of surrender. They fought like cornered wolves, fierce, relentless, their desperation sharpening every strike. Arrows were loosed at close range, punching through climbing bodies. Boiling oil cascaded over the walls in searing torrents, igniting screams that cut through the clash of steel. Spears thrust downward, knocking attackers from ladders and ropes alike, sending them tumbling back into the chaos below. It was not a battle, it was a struggle for survival. And, at its center, Aeryn moved. Not like a man bound by the limits of flesh and instinct, but like something unchained, something that had finally stepped into its true shape. His blade flashed in tight, efficient arcs, turning aside strikes that seemed certain to land, cutting down enemies before they could fully commit to their attack. He did not hesitate. He did not second-guess. He knew. Every feint revealed itself to him before it was completed. Every hidden advance unfolded in his mind, as though he had already seen it happen. It was as if the mountain itself whispered into his ear, feeding him the rhythm of the battle, the pulse of the enemy's intent.
Left flank. Pull back.
Men obeyed without question, falling into new positions, just as a surge of attackers broke against the very spot they had been ordered to defend.
Archers, shift to the lower ridge. Now.
They moved, and moments later, a second wave of climbers appeared, exactly where he had sent them. Again and again, he cut the enemy off before they could gain ground, closing breaches before they could form, intercepting infiltrators before they could slip through unseen. It was not strategy alone. It was something deeper, something impossible. At his side, Lisa fought like a storm given flesh. Her laughter rang out above the chaos, wild, unrestrained, edged with something dangerously close to joy. Her blade carved brutal paths through armored bodies, each strike driven with crushing force. She met heavier weapons head-on, turning them aside or breaking through them entirely, her strength and ferocity overwhelming any who dared face her. As she drove her sword through the throat of a soldier whose armor had failed him at the joint, she exclaimed,
"You've gone mad."
Aeryn twisted aside just in time to avoid a downward strike that would have split his skull, his blade snapping up to deflect it before cutting across his attacker's exposed side. He shot back, breath sharp but steady.
Probably, but it's working.
Below, amidst the ordered chaos of the advancing army, the masked warlord watched. He did not move with the others. He did not shout commands. He simply observed. And for the first time, there was the slightest pause in his stillness. Then slowly he raised a hand. The effect was immediate. The Eastern army shifted, not in panic, not in confusion, but with precise, calculated coordination. Lines parted, formations adjusted, and from within their ranks a new force emerged. They were different, heavier, more deliberate. Their armor was thicker, layered in dark plates that dulled the light. In their hands, they carried strange hooked blades, curved and jagged, designed not merely to cut, but to catch, to pull, to tear. They did not charge the gates. They did not climb the main walls. Instead, they broke away, moving along the narrow edge of the mountain, a treacherous path that twisted along the cliffside, half hidden and rarely used. Lightly guarded, overlooked. Aeryn froze. Not physically, his body still moved, still fought, but something in his awareness locked onto the shift below with sudden, absolute clarity. He saw it, not with his eyes, but with that same impossible certainty that had guided him since the battle began. A path through the mountain, a hidden artery, a weakness.
They're going for the spine.
The words slipped out before he fully realized he was speaking. Sereth, fighting nearby, turned sharply.
What did you say?
The inner passage. It leads straight to the keep.
For a heartbeat, Sereth simply stared at him. Then the color drained from his face. When he responded, his denial was immediate.
No one knows that path.
Well, it is clear that they do.
There was no room for doubt in his tone, no room for argument. He turned, already moving, his voice cutting through the chaos with a force that demanded obedience.
12 men, with me.
The command rang out across the battlements, sharp and absolute. And those who heard it, those who had fought beside him, those who had watched him turn the tide, again and again in the span of a single morning, did not hesitate. They followed. The battle for the spine was fought in a place never meant for war. The passage was narrow, no wider than a cart at its broadest, and in some places barely enough for two men to stand shoulder to shoulder. On one side, the sheer wall of the mountain rose in jagged, unyielding stone. On the other, there was nothing, just open air, a long, plunging drop into the abyss below, where wind howled endlessly through unseen depths and swallowed all things that fell into it. There was no room for formations here, no space for maneuvering, only forward or down. Steel rang against steel in a relentless, deafening rhythm, each clash amplified by the confined space, until it seemed the mountain itself trembled with the force of it. Sparks flared and died in the dim light. The scent of blood came quickly, sharp and metallic, mingling with the cold, thin air. Men fought and slipped, struggled and lost their footing. Some were struck down where they stood, their bodies crumpling against the stone. Others staggered backward, arms flailing for balance that never came, before vanishing over the edge. Their screams tore free for a heartbeat, raw, desperate, then were swallowed whole by the wind. Aeryn moved through it all, like a blade drawn across taut skin. There was no wasted motion in him now, no hesitation. Every step was placed with impossible precision, every strike measured, every parry exact. The chaos of the battle seemed to part around him, not because it lessened, but because he understood it, because he could feel it. The mountain pulsed beneath his feet, not physically, but in that same strange, unseen way he had known since his dream. A rhythm, a current. It guided him, whispered to him, showed him where to move, where to strike, where death waited if he chose wrongly. At the center of the passage, he found the one he had been moving toward all along. The masked warlord stood amidst the carnage, untouched. Up close, he seemed wrong, not monstrous, not unnatural in any obvious way. And yet there was something in the way he moved that unsettled the eye. His motions were too precise, too controlled, each step perfectly balanced, each strike delivered with mechanical certainty, as though hesitation had been carved out of him entirely. Even his stillness felt deliberate, calculated.
You don't belong here.
His voice was muffled by the beast-shaped helm, stripped of warmth, flattened into something cold and distant. It did not rise or fall with emotion. It simply was. Aeryn tilted his head slightly, studying him.
I was just told the opposite.
There was no more time for words. They moved. The clash came fast, faster than anything Aeryn had faced before. The warlord struck first, his blade cutting through the air in a blur that forced Aeryn to react on instinct alone. Steel met steel with a force that jolted his arms, sending a sharp shock up through bone and muscle. He barely held the block, barely turned the strike aside in time to avoid having his guard shattered entirely. The second blow came before the first had fully resolved. Then the third. The warlord pressed him relentlessly, each strike flowing into the next with terrifying precision. There was no wasted motion, no opening left carelessly exposed. Strength and speed combined into something overwhelming, each impact driving Aeryn a step closer to the edge, boots scraping against stone slick with blood.
You feel it, don't you?
Even in combat, his voice remained unnervingly calm.
The call of this place.
Aeryn gritted his teeth, forcing his blade into position just in time to deflect a downward strike that would have split him in two. The admission came sharp, pulled from him as much by truth as by effort.
Yes, but it called me first.
The words struck harder than any blade. For a fraction of a moment, doubt flickered. It was small, brief, but it was there. The mountain's pull, the dream, the certainty that had guided him. What if it had not been meant for him at all? What if he had only followed in the wake of something older, something already claimed? The warlord pressed forward, sensing the hesitation, his strikes growing more aggressive, more punishing. And then Aeryn saw it, not in the arc of the blade, nor in the positioning of the feet, but in the space between movements. A flaw, the smallest hesitation, not in action, but in intent. A hunger, a reaching. Where Aeryn felt the mountain as something that recognized him, the warlord moved like a man trying to grasp something that remained just out of reach. Every strike, every step, it was all too perfect, too forced, too driven. Not with certainty, but in desperation.
You are not chosen.
The words slipped through the clash of steel, calm and certain despite the chaos around them.
You're chasing something that keeps slipping away.
For the first time, the warlord faltered. It was almost imperceptible, a fraction of a heartbeat, a shift in weight just slightly out of alignment, but it was enough. Rage flared behind the mask, sudden and violent. The next strike came harder, faster, driven not by precision alone, but by something unfiltered, something uncontrolled. Their blades met one final time, the impact ringing like a bell. And, in that instant, Aeryn moved. He twisted inside the arc of the strike, stepping forward instead of back, into the space the warlord had overcommitted to. His shoulder brushed against dark armor as he slipped past the guard, his movement fluid, inevitable. Then he drove his weapon forward. Steel punched through plate, through resistance, through flesh. The warlord stiffened. For a heartbeat, they stood locked together, close enough that Aeryn could hear the faint, uneven breath behind the mask, close enough to feel the moment something within the other man broke. His opponent's weapon slipped from his grasp, clattering against the stone.
Slowly, he staggered back.
Then he fell. His body struck the ground once, and then slid just slightly toward the edge. Below, the wind waited. By the time night fell over Taen Ango, the battle was over. The Eastern Army, once so precise and unyielding, fractured without its leader. Discipline dissolved into confusion, then into fear. Orders went unanswered. Lines broke. Soldiers turned and fled, abandoning formation, abandoning purpose. They scattered into the wilderness, vanishing into forests and valleys, leaving behind only the aftermath of their failed assault. Their red banners lay trampled in the mud, torn and darkened, their meaning lost before it had ever truly been known. And high above the shattered battlefield, where smoke drifted in slow fading spirals and the cries of the wounded dwindled into silence, the fortress still stood. The Dragon's Rest had weathered the storm, barely. Its walls were scarred and blackened, pitted by fire and steel. Sections of the outer ramparts had collapsed into jagged ruin, leaving raw wounds in the stone where defenders had fought and fallen. The great gates hung broken on their hinges, splintered and warped, as though they had resisted until the very last moment before yielding. The battlements were strewn with the remnants of battle, discarded weapons, shattered shields, and the still forms of those who would never rise again. And yet it endured, like an old warrior refusing to fall, held upright not by strength alone, but by sheer, unyielding will. Through the aftermath, past soldiers tending to the wounded and gathering the dead, Aeryn made his way back into the heart of the fortress. The echoes of battle still clung to him, the clash of steel, the cries, the rhythm of something deeper that had guided his every step. But as he climbed higher, toward the chamber at the peak, those sounds began to fade, replaced by something quieter, something final. He entered without announcement. Kael'var lay where he had been before, wrapped in heavy furs, though they seemed now more ceremonial than practical. The cold had settled fully into the chamber, the air still and thin, as though even the wind had grown reluctant to disturb the space. The old lord's breathing was shallow, so faint it seemed each inhale might be his last, each exhale a quiet surrender. His chest rose unevenly, the effort visible even in stillness. Aeryn stopped beside him.
"It is done, sire."
The words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything that had passed, the blood, the fire, the survival of a place that should have fallen. Kael'var's lips curved, just slightly.
Of course it is.
There was no surprise in his voice, no need for confirmation, only the quiet certainty of a man who had already seen the ending, long before it arrived. Aeryn hesitated. For the first time since the battle had begun, uncertainty touched him, not in action, but in understanding.
"What is this place, and why me?"
The questions lingered in the cold air, heavier than any blade. Kael'var's gaze shifted to him, and for a moment, the weight of years seemed to fall away. There was no weakness in his eyes now, only clarity, a knowing that ran deeper than explanation.
Taen Ango does not choose the strongest nor the bravest.
His breath caught slightly, but he continued.
It chooses the one who listens.
Aeryn frowned, the words settling uneasily within him.
To what should he listen?
Kael'var's gaze drifted upward, past the stone arches, past the open sky beyond.
To what was left behind long before living memory.
The meaning of it did not come all at once. It did not arrive in words or in understanding, shaped by logic. It came as a feeling.
Aeryn felt it then, not in the air,
Not in the chamber, but deep below, beneath the fortress, beneath the mountain itself. Something ancient stirred, not awake, not fully, but aware. A presence vast and patient, older than memory, older than the stones that surrounded it. It did not speak, yet it pressed against him, the same way it had in his dream. The same pull, the same recognition, watching, waiting, not for conquest, not for power, but for someone. Aeryn's breath slowed as the realization settled into him, not as fear, but as understanding that reached beyond thought. Beside him, Kael'var exhaled one final time. It was softer than the others, lighter, and then stillness. His withered old face now looked serene, as if he was at peace. His hand, which had rested loosely against the firs, slipped gently to his side and did not move again. The chamber fell silent. Days passed. The dead were honored, the wounded tended to, the broken walls began to be slowly, carefully mended. Life returned in cautious steps, as though unsure whether it was welcome after so much loss. But something had changed. High above, at the mountain's peak, the wind carried a new sound. It was not quite a roar, not quite a voice, but something in between, a low, resonant echo that seemed to rise from the depths of the mountain itself, threading through the air in long, haunting tones. Those who heard it could not name it, yet none forgot it. And in the highest tower, where the old lord had once stood watch over his domain, a young warlord now took his place. Aeryn stood at the edge of the world, his gaze cast outward across the endless stretch of land and sky. The wind pulled at his cloak, carrying with it the distant whispers of something far older than kingdoms, older than memory itself. He was no longer merely a rambler, no longer just a man who followed battles and blood. There was something else within him now, something awakened, something bound not by ambition, but by purpose. He did not rule Taen Ango. He guarded it, and whatever lay beneath. The mountain remained as it had always been, silent, watchful, enduring, but it was no longer waiting. The dragon's rest had chosen once again.